Hello everybody. Today is a big day because we're tackling a very hot topic. The influence the bow has on the sound of a stringed instrument. And it's huge. This is not just a little side thing. I don't know if many bows you've tried, and if you tried the comparison between wooden bows and carbon bows on your instrument or other instruments. Well, we did. And we did a lot of that over the past 20 years. And today I'm going to share with you some of our experience and what we learned and some explanations. And of course, it's some kind of a test or comparison between the different types of bows, their make, their materials. And we hope that you'll learn something very special from it. All right. Let's first take a look at some reference bows. I have here two not so bad wooden bows, one French, one German. One is made from a lighter wood, the other one is made from a rather heavy wood. And let's hear what the difference does. Of course there's a playing difference in the weight and the balance and all that, but let's focus on the sound for today. I have a very beautiful violin from Oliver Radke, which sounds just like the finest old Italians. So it is really a reference for judging bows and testing bows. So let's begin with a lighter bow, which is also significantly lighter in total. It's got a lighter color also, which is often telling, and let's see how that sounds on this violin. There's not much difference on the G string. It's pretty much the same. Maybe the heavier bow is a little thicker, a little warmer, a little bit richer, but not much. But now let's try the E string. That's a quality difference, I would say. This is a little more narrow with the lighter wood, and the darker, heavier wood adds richness and color. Also on the A string. Well, here the difference is maybe the biggest. Yes, certainly. Oh, let me tell you something about the procedure. When you compare bows, it's always useful to only play a couple notes and then switch bows. Because our brain is working in that way that we have a short-term memory that can hold a lot of information, but only for something like 10 or 12 seconds, or maybe 20. It really depends on the research you read, but it's a very short period. And you should try to play both bows within that short period, because you can store the information about all the complexity and richness of the sound in this short time frame. If you play, for example, half a minute on one bow and then half a minute on another, when you play the second bow, you've already forgotten what the first bow was like. So I recommend to do very, very short excerpts and then focus on one string and just play a few notes. Don't play a piece or something. So while I did that, you could easily tell that, especially on the A string, this somewhat more expensive old German bow did sound a lot better, the one with a heavier stick and the heavier wood, than the lighter French bow. In playability, with the two bows, it's the other way around. So I would say that the lighter bow, to me, handles and feels a lot better. The heavier bow is kind of tip heavy and a little sluggish, a little hard to play when you have delicate stuff. And that's often a trade-off that you have with wooden bows, that you have to make a decision if you prefer a better playability or a better sound. And it can be really, really challenging to find a bow that has it all. Actually, I never found one. Right, now let's move one step ahead and let's take a look at some very common carbon fiber bows. And I have two examples here. I have a beautiful made Chinese bow. One of the most beautiful Chinese bows I've seen. It's not very expensive, but yeah, very playable. And I have here an American carbon fiber bow, which is very, very popular, a lot more expensive. But the interesting bit is that in the sound, you can almost tell no difference. The American one. It's pretty much exactly the same, if you ask me. No, I can't hear much difference. Let's try the G string. And the American. Really almost no difference. Let's compare it with the heavier wood bow. Well, that is indeed a beautiful sound, if you ask me. So you see the A string. That's a step down. That was the American carbon bow. The wood bow sounds a lot richer, a lot more colorful. So the prejudice against carbon fiber bows seems to be very well justified. The carbon bows sound more gritty and less colorful, less rich, more like a lesser wood bow. But you know what? That's not the end of the story, because this is what I would say a first generation carbon fiber bow. And the trick is that the stick is actually made from more epoxy than carbon fiber. So a carbon fiber compound is always carbon fibers that are hold together or hold in place by a resin. Most times epoxy is used. It's a very hard resin. And if you look a little closer at these sticks, you can also see it, that there's fibers swimming in resin. And if you think about that microscopic, you find that the fibers are packed in epoxy, so they're kind of like swimming. And this epoxy has a lot of damping, and that's what's killing the high frequency overtones, and also creates some distortion in the sound. Now, what happens when we reduce the epoxy content of the stick significantly? Well, then we end up with something like this. This is an Arcus M3, for example, and let's compare this to the bows before. Let's compare it to the wood bow. Again, the Arcus. That is very similar, isn't it? So, it's not actually the fault of the carbon fibers, but of the epoxy. And then there's something in between, between the relatively luxurious Arcus bows and more normal carbon fiber or cheaper wooden bows. We have designed or developed a new series of bows, which is the Müsing line, over the past couple of years. And let's try the lowest model, the C2. And let's compare it to a more expensive American carbon fiber bowl. Let's try that again. Not too much of a difference, but still it is there. Try the American first. So here we hear quite a difference. It's again on the A string. So like on the D string you don't hear that much difference, but on the A string you do. So one of the aspects, as a little side note here, is when you compare bows and when you judge bows, just like an instrument or strings or whatever, try the whole range of the instrument. Play every string in lower and higher positions, and try to find a bow, for example, if you're looking for a bow, that delivers a sound all over the place, and especially in the weak areas. And the third position on the A string is such a weak spot where most instruments don't sound too beautiful. And if you have a bow that supports that, a better sound, I mean, then you've found possibly the right one. So let's do this. Let's do a trio comparison here. I take the better of the wood bows. This is a little weaker, and the Müsing. Very much like the wooden bow. Let's go back to the wood. So the Müsing C2 delivers about the same sound as a wooden bow 2 or 3 times its price, especially on that weaker area. And let's try the lowest Arcus model. It's different, it has a different character, but it's on a similar level, I would say. So there's the next thing. What character are you looking for in the sound? And there is no telling of good and bad. It's really a question of the sound you like. And that's, as you're the one who's going to play with a bow most of the time, and most people will only listen for a short period of time, whether it's your teacher or your husband or a good friend or your orchestra colleague even, make it your decision. If you feel at home with a certain sound, go for it. Don't let yourself be irritated by other people's comment or judgment. They hear different, they have a different perception of sounds, and they don't have to hear it all the time. Now the other question is, how does price relate to sound? And when you try a wide variety of wooden bows, there is some kind of connection, but it's not very clear. And sometimes a less expensive bow would deliver a more beautiful sound than a much more expensive bow. So the reason is that wooden bows are priced for workmanship, for the beauty of the wood, by the name of the maker, by the papers that come with it, and of course the condition of the bow. But and of course the weight and the tension and all that. But sound is just one small part of the game. We have the luxury with our bows, with our Müsing and Arcus bows, that we can classify strictly for the sound, because well, the name is the same, the make is the same, and we have a very tight control on the strings and the stiffness and the curve and the density and all that. That's not an issue. So what we do is, when we make a series of bows, we classify them for the resonance quality, and the differences are actually quite large. So what I can show you here, for example, is I have two Müsing bows and two Arcus bows. Let's start with the Müsing C2 and C4 and see what difference it does make. One of the good ideas if you try bows is if you try them in piano, because in a piano you hear much clearer what the influence of the bow is. So when I compare the two Müsing bows, I will play piano. Do that again. I would say there's quite a bit a difference. A part of that you can hear, the other part you have to feel, because for the somewhat lesser bow, the C2, we have to work a little more precise to get to the same result, while the C4 offers more flexibility in your playing, and still give you a good sound, even if you bow a little too fast or a little too slow, or with a little too much or too little pressure or what. So there is a playability issue that also comes into play, which is so closely related to the sound that it's sometimes difficult to tell them both apart. Now let's also take a look at two Arcus bows that I have here. That's the M3. Well, that's quite a big difference, because that's a P9, that's our top of the line, and you can easily hear, not see, you can easily hear that it offers a completely different sound spectrum on the instrument. Let's just focus on a few tones. I don't know how well that comes over your speakers or your headphones, but it's the higher price, the higher model, offers a sound that's much more 3D, much more complex, and when you try it in a big hall, you will also experience that it carries a lot easier. And aside from playing piano and pianissimo, it will also allow you to play quite a bit louder, which is surprising if you've never tried that before. So, all in all, to wrap it up, if you look at the first generation, I would say, simple carbon fiber bows, it's true, the prejudice is true, they do not sound quite as nice as a good wooden bow. When you go to more modern carbon fiber bows that have a much reduced epoxy content in the stick, and also quite a bit cleaner from the inside, if you cut it open you will see it. Now don't do that at all. Then it actually turns the other way around, and you experience that carbon bows actually do sound a lot better than wooden bows can. And the reason is that they have less stamping in their carbon fiber matrix because it's got such a low resin content. And the carbon fibers, they resonate like even better than glass. If you ever hit a glass, you know how that works. And hit a piece of wood and compare the two. So it's pretty obvious that if you get carbon fiber right, you can open a new quality of sound on the instrument that wood just can't deliver. Yeah, that's so much for an introduction into the sound of bows and a little comparison between wood and carbon fiber. And we'll go more in depth in later videos and explain what happens in the different categories and the tuning of bows and the possibilities we have there. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, click like button and check out our other videos. Please also comment. We'll be happy to read your comments and promise to reply on all of them. And yes, do go out and find some Arcus or Müsing bows and try them for yourself. Thank you. Bye.